Greetings and shalom, saints of the Most High. I want to talk to you today about what the Greek mindset stole from our Bible reading and how we get it back. Most of us engage in our Bible reading and studies using a default lens. Some unbiased Bible scholars call this default lens Greek mindset. Turns out that we were handed this Greek mindset long before we could identify it. And for many of us, it came with our Sunday school lessons. For others, it came with seminary or cemetery training. Certainly many of the commentaries, many of the teachings we received, and hymns we even sang when we were in the church triumphant contributed as well. Consequently, the Greek mindset is so deeply embedded in the way we read Scripture that most of us don't even know it is there. Unfortunately, this mindset has been quietly distorting our understanding of Scripture for a very long time. The Greek mindset is rooted in the traditions put forth by Greek philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle. Their literary works and teachings helped inform and influence what we've come to know today as the Hellenistic worldview. The Hellenistic worldview informed the ancient world's conception or understanding of life and the world around us through abstraction. It asks, what is the ideal form before us? What is the universal principle involved here? What can be systematized into a doctrine that holds true across all eras, peoples, and places? Now, don't get me wrong, beloved. Hellenism and its Greek worldview was, in and of itself, not an evil framework, per se. Greek philosophy has produced remarkable insights about logic, ethics, and the natural world. But the Hebrew Bible was not written by Greeks. Let me repeat that. The Hebrew Bible was not written by Greeks. Rather, it was written by Hebrews. More specifically, the Old Testament, or the Tanakh, was written by Hebrews. The vast majority of the books of the New Testament, or the Brit HaDashah, was written by Jews. And the Hebraic mindset approaches reality through something entirely different, through story, through covenant, through embodied action, concrete relationship between the creator of the universe and a covenant people in real time. So when one imposes the Greek mindset onto a Hebraic text, they do not simply get a different interpretation. Rather, they get a fundamentally different document altogether. Unfortunately, that difference has cost the body of Mashiach, the body of Messiah, more than we have ever fully recognized. So what follows are 4 specific things the Greek-based interpretation and understanding of Scripture has obscured, and what we recover when we read Scripture through Hebraic lenses. Number 1. The Greek mindset stole the concreteness of Torah. When the Greek mind reads Torah, it tends to immediately spiritualize the commandments. The dietary laws become symbols as opposed to defining what Yah deems as acceptable food his chosen and elect ones are to consume. The weekly Sabbath becomes a principle instead of a moed, an appointed time of Yah that his people are commanded to shamar, to remember, to keep, to walk out. The feast of the Lord become shadows that have been entirely replaced by the substance, as opposed to them being actual rehearsals or convocations and moedim that Yah's set-apart people are compelled to zakor, guard, keep, observe. The Hebrew of Leviticus 23 does not say, "These are types and shadows for a future era." It simply says, "These are my appointed times. These are my moedim, which you shall proclaim as holy convocations." The word moedim means an appointed time, a holy convocation, a rehearsal, a sacred gathering. The feast of the Lord, like the whole of Torah, ultimately point the world to Yeshua. And that fact is most definitely amazing and important and wonderful and all that to understand. But at the end of the day, beloved, the feast of the Lord are appointed times and convocations and rehearsals with the God who sent his son Yeshua. Yeshua, you see, never missed his Father's appointed times, despite the feast pointing God's people to him. You see, beloved, when we read the commandments of Yehovah with Hebraic eyes, we stop asking, does this commandment still apply to me? And we start asking, what does Yehovah have in store for me as I remember and keep his appointed times? Or how does Yah want me to remember and keep his feast in 2026? These are profoundly more fruitful questions to ponder. Number 2, the Greek mindset stole the Jewishness or Hebraic reality of Yeshua. The Greek mindset has produced a Yeshua, a Jesus, who is a universal spiritual principle. He is viewed by Christianity or Christendom as the divine logos of John 1, read through a Platonic lens rather than through its own Hebrew context, as the seed that would crush the head of the serpent, as recorded in Genesis 3. Yeshua of Nazareth was a first-century Jewish rabbi who kept Torah. He observed the feast of his father. He read from Torah scrolls in the synagogue, and he debated halakha with the scribes and Pharisees in distinctly Hebraic terms. Luke chapter 4, verse 16 says it was his custom to attend the synagogue on Shabbat. John Yochanan chapter 10, verses 22 and 23 places him in the temple courts during Hanukkah. Luke chapter 22, verse 15 records him saying he eagerly desired to eat the Passover with his disciples. You see, the Yeshua of Greek theology is a philosophical proposition. The Yeshua of the Hebrew scriptures is a covenant son, a Torah observant rabbi, and the embodiment of everything Yisrael was called to be, but never realized. So reading the master through Hebraic eyes does not diminish his office as our divinely approved Redeemer and Yisrael's Mashiach, Yisrael's Messiah. It makes his atoning sacrifice far more powerful. And I point you to Galatians chapter 4, verses 4 and 5 for this. Number 3, the Greek mindset stole the narrative coherence of the entire Bible. The Greek mindset, shaped by systematic theology, tends to divide the Bible into dispensations. The old versus the new, the law versus grace, covenant rejected Jews versus redeemed and converted Gentiles, Yisrael's or Yisrael or Israel versus the church triumphant. It reads Paul as repudiating Torah and New Testament as a correction of the Old Testament. But the Hebrew narrative does no such thing. The Tanakh, the so-called Old Testament, is not a problem that the Brit HaDashah, the so-called New Testament, solves. It is a story that the Brit HaDashah continues. Our 66-book special is one unbroken crimson thread. The same covenant that the God, the Allah, who called Abraham, delivered Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, gave Torah to us at Sinai, and spoke through his holy prophets, his Nevi'im, is the same God, the same Allah, who sent his Son in the fullness of time to redeem his human creation. Ephesians chapter 1, verses 9 and 10. Paul in Romans 11 does not describe Torah as obsolete or archaic. He describes the Gentile believer as a wild olive branch or olive tree branch, or however you want to articulate that. And it's a branch that Yah has grafted into a cultivated Hebrew olive tree, drawing life from a root he did not plant. And he warned his Roman Messianic students explicitly not to be arrogant toward the branches that were there first. Romans chapter 11, verses 17 through 21. So when we read with Hebraic eyes, the Bible becomes one continuous story. Not two books in contention, one with the other. We're talking about one covenant and an expansive progressive revelation. Number 4, the Messianic mindset stole the voice of the text itself. Biblical Hebrew is concrete, active, embodied, and personal. The Hebrew word for faith, emunah, does not mean intellectual assent or acquiescence to a proposition. It means faithfulness. It means reliability, steadfastness. The same word is used of a nursing mother holding her child. And she is steady. She is trustworthy. She's committed. Numbers chapter 11, verse 12. You know, when the prophet in Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4 says, the righteous shall live by his faith, or his emunah, and the apostle quotes it 3 times in Romans chapter 1, verse 17, Galatians chapter 3, verse 11, and Hebrews chapter 10, verse 38. He is not talking about a moment of mental assent or some form of cognitive affirmation that something is a certainty or truth. He is talking about a covenant life of faithful, embodied loyalty to the creator of the universe. That distinction changes everything about what it means to be saved, about obedience, and what it means to walk with God and his Son, Yeshua. So how do we get it back? How do we get the Hebraic mindset back? And how do we set aside the Greek mindset in our efforts to come to truth in the scriptures that Yah has gifted us? Well, the recovery of the Hebraic mindset is not a contrived program that one picks up from reading a book or some kind of commentary. There may be books out there that deal with this, but for the most part, it is an intentional practice. So here are 3 starting points to help us transition into that Hebraic mindset. Number 1, read Torah as Torah, not as an antiquated introduction to the New Testament or the Brit HaDashah, but as the foundational document of the covenant community and the nation that Yeshua came to embody and lead. Let it inform and make demands on our lives rather than rushing through it in order to get to the real scriptures, to the God of love, Jesus Christ in the New Testament, as I've heard before. This should be first and foremost when we study Torah. Read Torah as Torah. Beyond this, there's nothing wrong with exploring deeper meaning behind our Torah reads. We just have to keep the peshat or rote and the midrashic or allegorical understandings of Torah in context and in proper perspective. Number 2, become Feast of the Lord scholars. The Moedim, the set-apart days of the Lord, as described in Leviticus, Vayikra chapter 23, and Deuteronomy or Devarim 16, are the annual rehearsals and convocations of Jehovah's covenant and redemptive calendar. Passover or Pesach, unleavened bread or matzah, first fruits or Yom HaBikurim, Shavuot or Pentecost, Yom Teruah, or Day of Trumpets, Yom Kippur, the Day of the Atonements, or Yom HaKippurim, the Day of the Atonements. And, of course, Sukkot, or Tabernacles, are not just Jewish holidays. They are the appointed times, the set-apart times, the Moedim of Yehovah. They belong to Yehovah. And Yehovah shares them with every soul who is in a covenant relationship with him. It's not the feast of the Jews, as so many have written and so many have taught. Number 3, figure out how to read the New Testament and the Brit HaDashah as a Hebrew document. John's or Yochanan's gospel is not a Platonic treatise as some might espouse. It is a Hebrew poetry wrapped in historical documentation. Paul's letters are not systematic theology or church operation manuals, as I've heard mentioned several times in my journey. Rather, they are Hebraic midrash. They wrestle with Torah in light of the Messiah, in light of the Mashiach. And so when we read them that way, they open up in ways that centuries of Greek interpretation and understanding have kept sealed. And one more thing to consider, beloved. Seminaries and religious scholars have pounded into the skulls of their students and graduates that the entire New Testament, the Brit HaDashah, was penned in Greek, since Koine Greek was the lingua franca of the Roman Empire and the known first century world. And if you challenge that, they will beat you down. You will lose all credibility. But that understanding is horrendously flawed, especially in light of the unique microcosm that was first century Judea. Truth be told, beloved, the vast majority of Judeans did not speak Greek as their primary language. They may have spoken a little Greek in order to get by or to make a dollar and a cent. But they spoke primarily Hebrew, especially in their homes, especially in the synagogue, especially when communing with one another, when fellowshipping with one another. So when Yeshua's taught ones turned sent ones wrote their gospel accounts, they, being Orthodox Jews, wrote their accounts in Hebrew and Aramaic, primarily to Jewish audiences, with maybe the exception of most of Paul's pastoral writings that targeted Roman Empire Messianic assemblies, being 12, maybe 13 books of the 27 New Testament canon writings composed in that actual Greek. Now, I only bring this up because this embedded Greek bias that insists the full apostolic record was penned exclusively in Koine Greek only adds to the Greek mindset malaise that we as the engrafted souls of the commonwealth of Yisrael must learn to overcome. The Greek mindset in and of itself is not our enemy. It is more of a challenge to the redeemed truth seeker because it does not form the basis of true biblical culture and understanding. The scripture was written in Hebrew and Aramaic by covenant people who thought in and communicated through stories, argued in parables, and measured truth by whether it bore fruit in a life lived before the great I Am. So, what do you say we read the Bible? Read Yah's word in that way, and watch that which we have been missing our entire lives miraculously come alive to us. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Until next time, may you be most blessed, fellow saints in training.